On the 14th of May, I quietly celebrated a milestone that once felt impossible: 10 years free from antidepressants. As I reflected on that date, I found myself thinking not only about the moment I swallowed my final dose, but everything that came afterwards. The years of healing, the years of survival, the years of rebuilding a life that at times felt completely beyond my reach. If someone had told me back then that one day I'd be sitting here writing these words, I would never have believed them. After 19 years on antidepressants, numerous failed tapering attempts, drug switches and countless battles to break free, I genuinely thought reaching zero would be the finish line. I believed that once I was finally off antidepressants, the suffering would end and my life would begin again. Sadly, that wasn't my experience. Those of you that know my story will know that protracted withdrawal became the next chapter in my journey. When I thought the hardest part was over. 10 years ago, I had finally completed my last taper. Despite still experiencing withdrawal symptoms throughout the tapering process, I was filled with hope and optimism. I truly believed that I was stepping into a brighter chapter in my life. Whilst I had struggled throughout tapering, the withdrawal I was experiencing at that time was just about tolerable. However, within days of taking my final dose, everything changed. I declined rapidly and was plunged into a darkness I never knew existed. I became bedridden, unable to care for myself and unable to walk unaided. I lived in relentless physical, emotional and psychological agony. I felt terrified, broken and completely overwhelmed by what was happening to my mind and body. At the time, I didn't understand what was happening. During the many tapering attempts I had made over the years, I had experienced withdrawal symptoms in different forms and intensities. But this was different. This was bigger. I was confused, frightened, and desperately searching for answers. Like so many others, I turned to the medical system for help. When I spoke to my doctor, I was told that withdrawal would only last a couple of weeks. I desperately wanted that to be true. For me, it wasn't, and protracted withdrawal continued for over 5 years. Those years completely derailed my life as I fought fiercely to survive, heal, and understand what had happened to me. Looking back now, I can see how little information and support were available to me. I wasn't informed about the risks. I wasn't prepared for what could happen. I wasn't given the knowledge I needed to navigate what lay ahead. Instead, like so many others, I had to become my own advocate. Before I continue, I want to gently pause here and say something important. Please don't measure your own journey against mine or allow my timeline to create fear. Whilst many of the experiences, symptoms and challenges of withdrawal can be remarkably similar, the duration and severity of recovery vary enormously from person to person. There are so many factors that can influence how withdrawal unfolds, including the psychiatric drugs involved, the length of time they were taken for, previous drug changes, individual biology, nervous system sensitivity, and the way tapering is approached. One of the reasons I continue to share my story and create resources is because I hope others can learn from the mistakes, lack of information, and insufficient support that contributed to the severity and duration of my own experience. My hope is that the knowledge, wisdom, and insights I have gained can help others taper more safely, navigate withdrawal with greater understanding, and avoid some of the unnecessary suffering that I endured. What healing taught me. Over the last decade, I've spent years learning, researching, and connecting with the incredible withdrawal community. Looking back, I now understand that my final tapering process was far from ideal. Although it was spread over several years, I now know that many of my reductions were still too large and too fast, particularly as the dose became lower. I also understand that my many failed tapering attempts, drug switches, the length of time I took antidepressants, previous kindling, and at the young age I was first prescribed them may all have played a role in what followed. At the time, I knew none of this. What surprises me most when I look back is that healing was happening anyway. For such a long time, I believed I was permanently damaged. I convinced myself that if I wasn't getting noticeably better, then perhaps I wasn't healing at all. Yet, underneath the fear, pain and despair, my body was working tirelessly to rebalance and recover. Healing was happening beneath the surface even when I couldn't see it. One of the hardest lessons for me to learn was that healing would take as long as it needed to take. For years, I put enormous pressure on myself to get better faster. I searched endlessly for answers. I worried that I was doing something wrong. I believed that there must be something more I should be doing to speed up the process. Eventually, I learned something both frustrating and freeing. There was no magic answer. There was no perfect supplement, technique, or shortcut that would make it all disappear overnight. What I did discover was that there were many ways I could support myself through the healing process. Self-compassion, nervous system care, rest, connection, mindset work, coping strategies, and learning how to calm fear all became essential tools in helping me endure the time it took for healing to unfold. These things didn't heal me overnight, but they helped me survive long enough for the healing to happen. Learning acceptance. Another lesson that changed everything for me was acceptance. Not giving up, not losing hope, acceptance. For so long, I resisted what was happening to me. I spent countless hours trapped in fear, desperately trying to figure out when I would recover and whether recovery would ever come. I fought reality every step of the way because I couldn't believe what was happening to me, nor could I surrender to it. I was so focused on getting better and finding a way out that I struggled to create the space, time, and gentleness that healing actually required. I resisted accepting that recovery would demand difficult changes and painful sacrifices, including letting go of parts of my old life in order to create the space my mind and body needed to heal. But when I finally began to surrender to the reality of my situation and meet myself where I was, something shifted. When I stopped pouring my energy into fighting the reality of my situation and instead focused what was within my control, I experienced a huge change in my healing journey. My attention shifted away from trying to force healing and towards supporting myself through healing. That distinction became incredibly important. Rediscovering myself. Perhaps one of the most important things I would wish I'd known is that the thoughts I experienced during withdrawal were not telling me the truth. Withdrawal placed my nervous system into a state of survival. From that state came endless catastrophic thoughts and fears. I believed I would never heal. I believed I would be like that forever. I believed I was damaged beyond repair. I believed I would never feel joy, purpose, connection, or contentment again. None of those fears came true. Slowly, as the years passed, the windows became longer, my emotions started to come back online, the suffering began to ease, life slowly started to reappear. Eventually, something remarkable happened. I came back to myself. In many ways, I met myself for the first time. It wasn't until I was fully off antidepressants and through withdrawal that I realised just how numb and disconnected I had become throughout my adult life. Whilst battling to be free from antidepressants and surviving protracted withdrawal was undoubtedly the hardest fight of my life, it was also one of the most transformative. Now, 10 years later, I feel happier and healthier than ever. Life isn't perfect. I'm still learning, growing, and healing. There are still experiences and traumas that I continue to process and understand. There are still parts of myself evolving and changing. But I feel connected. I feel empowered. I feel present. I feel alive. Life today is slower and smaller in many ways, but intentionally so. I am surrounded by people I love, and I continue to discover who I am outside of antidepressants and beyond withdrawal. I have discovered creativity, intuition, spirituality, empathy, and lightness within myself that felt buried for many years. For that, I feel incredibly grateful. What I wish I'd known. There are so many things I wish I'd known back then. I wish I had understood how important safe, slow, careful tapering truly is. If I had known what I know now about tapering, I believe I could have avoided years of suffering. I wish I had known that healing is rarely linear. It's layered, messy, and often difficult to recognise whilst it's happening. I wish I had known that recovery requires enormous patience, self-compassion, and grace. I wish I had understood sooner that there was nothing wrong with me for not healing faster. Most of all, I wish I had known that recovery was possible, even when I couldn't see it. Human beings are remarkable. Our bodies are capable of extraordinary healing. Even when I was at my lowest, even when I was convinced all hope was gone, my body was still working towards recovery. That recovery eventually came. Reflections from the other side. Looking back, the past 10 years have changed how I see almost everything. They have changed how I view suffering. They have changed how I view healing. They have changed how I view other people. They have changed what I value. Perhaps, most importantly, they have shown me that there was never anything fundamentally broken about me. Looking back, I can see that the young girl who first struggled with difficult but entirely normal emotions and the challenges of adolescence didn't need fixing, labelling, or medicating. She needed understanding, support, compassion, connection, and guidance as she learned to understand herself, feel and process her emotions, and navigate life's ups and downs. At 10 years free from antidepressants, I feel awakened, I feel alive, I feel free. Most importantly, I finally feel like me. If you're reading this whilst tapering, navigating withdrawal, or living through protracted withdrawal, I want you to know that I understand how impossible recovery can feel. I have stood in that darkness. I have lived those fears. I have had more days than I can count where I felt hope completely was out of reach. But recovery didn't happen overnight. It happened one day at a time, one breath at a time, one small step at a time. And if there's one thing I hope this milestone offers you, it is the reminder that healing remains possible, even on the days where you struggle to believe it. Your rainbow is still waiting on the other side of this storm. Just keep going. As I reflect on this milestone, I also find myself reflecting on the work I continue to do today. 10 years later, I still remember what it felt like to desperately search for answers, understanding and reassurance. I will never forget those people who held hope for me when I couldn't hold it for myself. The withdrawal community helped me find my way through some of the darkest years of my life, and I feel deeply honoured that my own story, experience and resources are now helping others do the same. Everything I create today comes from that place. My memoir, Swallowed Whole, the Antidepressant Tapering Companion, and the Antidepressant Withdrawal Survival Toolkit. They are simply the things I wish I had been given when I was tapering, navigating withdrawal and healing. And if they help one person feel a little less alone, then every part of this journey has been worth it. You are not alone. There is hope and there is life on the other side of surviving antidepressants. Sending you love, hope, and healing energy as always. Claire.